Beyond the Hood, stories and strategies to fuel dealer growth.
Welcome to Beyond the Hood with TractorZoom. I'm your host, Andy Campbell. Today, our guest is Jeff Oldham, the CEO of GreenMark Equipment, a 17-store John Deere dealership spanning Michigan and northern Indiana. Jeff and I will explore the intricacies of fostering a thriving organizational culture, navigating the influence of physical locale and local heritage. We dive into the nuances of leadership development, unpacking the art of attracting and nurturing talent through purposeful programs within a dealership. Jeff tackles the dynamic of change management versus change evolution, offering his insights, book recommendations, and practical strategies gleaned from his wealth of experience inside and outside of the ag dealership industry. Speaking of experience, Jeff's journey is worth noting. From his tenure at John Deere, where he served in various capacities, including divisional manager and director of sales, to his ventures outside the company with Volvo trucks, Jeff brings a unique perspective to the table. Now, as CEO of GreenMark for over 2 years, he shares his invaluable experiences and insights on leadership and culture, inviting you to look beyond the hood and uncover the secrets to sustainable dealership success. Join us as we look beyond the hood with Jeff Oldham. Welcome, everybody, to Beyond the Hood with TractorZoom and my discussion with Jeff Oldham of GreenMark. Jeff, we've had a conversation already just to lay the groundwork a little bit, but you've been with GreenMark how long now?
So almost 2.5 years.
Good. And I'll give a little bit of this discussion a little bit later, but GreenMark has 17 locations, 450 plus employees. Is that right?
Yeah. So we're a John Deere dealer, Western Michigan, Northern Indiana. So 17 locations throughout Western Michigan and Northern Indiana. Just over 450 employees, and just great organization.
Good. And the way that we got introduced is I was actually talking with a friend of mine who's on your staff now, and we're going to kind of get into that about hiring great people because I do think Brian's a great person. I wanted to talk to him about culture, but he's like, if you really want to talk to somebody about culture, he's like, GreenMark's got a great culture. Jeff has really taken it to the next level. And so that was kind of the impetus of starting this conversation, although I know our conversation today is going to even have some other tangential fingers that'll go out from there. But let's lay the groundwork first, because I know you started in Kansas City. That's your basic roots, right? Do you want to give me a little narrative on from Kansas City all the way up to Holland, Michigan?
Yeah. So kind of a long path. My background was I was 15 years with John Deere Company. I actually started when I was in college picking parts and shipping parts in what was the old parts warehouse in Kansas City. Loved the job, but really I wasn't a kid that grew up around agriculture and really didn't know a lot about the business other than just really, I love the people. I love the culture of John Deere. And so when I graduated from college, Deere had a hiring freeze on the time. And so I went to work in a different industry. But 7 years later, got a call from John Deere and just an opportunity to come back. Came into various different aftermarket and then sales related roles. Following my time with Deere, I actually had an opportunity to go into a dealer group. It was a family business. I moved back to Kansas City and gave me an opportunity to kind of move back home. And I always had a desire. I mean, I love this business. I love the retail side of the business and had an opportunity to get into a dealer group and really just learned a ton. Following that, I was recruited by another company, Volvo Trucks, and actually got out of the ag industry, went in the truck industry. That was kind of my first venture into that. Learned a lot and definitely enjoyed the interaction and the people, but had an opportunity to come back. And that's when GreenMark had recruited me. I joined GreenMark in January of 2022 and really have enjoyed. It's just been a phenomenal opportunity to get back into the Deere business and really very blessed with the opportunity of GreenMark and the geography and it's a phenomenal business, phenomenal people, and really proud to be a part of this
Good.
team.
And I've got questions for you later on the geography, especially of your kind of your mitten of Michigan that you're in. It's one of
Yeah,
my favorite places in the country, but we'll save that for later because you'd mentioned starting in the parts side. Uh,
yeah.
how has that maybe influenced a little bit about what you do now or your trajectory of starting there?
Yeah, so I've never been asked that question before. I mean, that's a really interesting question. And ultimately, what I appreciated about all of my experiences in John Deere, and even back to picking parts, shipping parts, had the opportunity when I was in that role where I was actually a parts expediter. So dealers were placing orders, I was scheduling or batching, the orders that would get shipped. I think two things. One is, definitely understand the intricate detail and kind of the focus, the detailed approach that a company like John Deere takes. Really, back then I was a union employee and an hourly employee that really, I was thinking about my opportunity to go to college, but, the experiences and really realizing the quality and the focus and the commitment that Deere makes both to employees, to the customers, to the dealers, and really the importance of the dealer network. I really enjoyed, and I think fast forward that today. I mean, I have a real appreciation for our teams and all across within every position. But it's also, I'd say part of that experience gave me a respect for my interaction with our partner in John Deere and understanding what they do and when there's delays in parts, and how we can learn from it and how we can try to proactively work together or, figure out ways as an organization that we get ahead or work ahead in some of those tactics and initiatives. But there's no doubt. I mean, it's picking parts in a warehouse. It was a phenomenal experience. Taught me a ton on the people side as well too, and really fortunate by that experience. So the people that I met, that I engaged with, and really had an opportunity early in my life, early in my career to learn from.
Oh, that's good because I can see it, like you said, on the micro side of just the detail orientation that it takes. But you're almost getting a degree in industrial engineering as you look at the efficiency and the supply chain that it actually takes
Right.
to execute that. But you said like on the macro side, it's a great symbiotic relationship between Deere and the dealers and the dealer network because that's a
Oh,
tough
for
thing to
sure.
balance, especially probably even back then without all the technology we have now.
Yeah, yeah, no, you bet. And I think that's really important. I mean, I think throughout my entire time at Deere recognized the importance of the dealer network. And no doubt, as a Deere dealer, you recognize the we want to be a John Deere
Mhm.
dealer. And so, I mean, definitely, as we work with our partner, there's give and take throughout all those relationships, but no doubt we are proud to be a John Deere dealer for sure.
Okay. And then later you had mentioned kind of leaving the industry, at least leaving the ag equipment industry and going over to Volvo and coming from somebody who I was working in food for a while and even higher ed, which is way outside of the ag industry. But I do believe you pick up tricks, tactics, or whatever to bring in. And then I know we're going to get into a discussion about hiring the right people and kind of building your team. So what did you learn at Volvo that you're kind of bringing in? And then maybe a more, secondary question on that is if you're looking to build talent on your team, do you ever look outside of the industry? And then what
Yeah.
traits do you look for outside the industry? Because again, we always talk about building your talent pool. And we know it's a tiny one. So do you have any advice for anybody looking outside the industry?
Yeah, that's tough. I mean, great question. Tough to answer, right? And I think, just as I feel like, I've been blessed and had the opportunity to hire some really great people, that made some mistakes along the way too. I think, one of the things that I really experienced in Volvo and Volvo was probably, so it was a company that Volvo owned that I had the opportunity to run and as a leader within that organization, it was a sales focused organization. And so we were hiring a lot of salespeople. And, at the time, early on in COVID and hiring people, turnover was challenging and finding good people was a challenge. And one of the things that we had a store manager that we actually moved into a training role and a training leadership position. And one of the things that I think he really helped us understand was kind of twofold and it was really around this need to really train people. And as we think about people resource and the need to really lean into people and the development of people, it was really critical for us at that point, and learned, where I think we probably all took advantage of. We can teach anybody anything. I've always felt like in the ag industry or even in the truck industry, we can teach trucks or we can teach tractors. It's hard to teach some of those inner, soft skills that I think, sometimes we struggle with, or we work with people that struggle with. And I think, what we did was a couple things. One was we took one of our greatest leaders and one of the great salespeople and moved him into a training role, which was a real expense.
Right.
We were taking a higher paid individual, a leader, and moved him into a position, and he wasn't going to go backwards in pay. And then we need to incentivize him with that. So compensation grew. But at the same time, one of the greatest things I think he did, and he really taught me through this, was we started profiling every salesperson. And so we started doing DISC assessments on every individual. And a part of that DISC assessment, we really started to just analyze the data that said who was a really good salesman, what makes them a great salesman, and what is their DISC profile. So as we then were out recruiting and spending time hiring people, we would have them do a DISC assessment early on in the process. And it was, I think it helped us in really who are the people that we really wanted to lean into and make sure we're not going to lose, or we weren't, we were going to make sure that we kept from a retention standpoint, but also at the same time, as we were recruiting new people, really telling us, I felt like we were hiring smarter, and so, helped on that learning curve and helped as we would pair them up with someone, or, helped from that on that mentoring side, as far as how we onboarded and ultimately trained and developed someone to be, what we would expect to be a great salesman in that role. I think that's helped me carry that over in some other roles and responsibilities and experiences for sure.
Good. And then you had mentioned DISC assessment. And so I want to make sure that we kind of clarify this, because not everybody might know a DISC assessment. And if I hadn't done it in a previous job, so I couldn't remember what the DISC stands for. I cheated. I got it on my phone here. Do you remember what it stands for?
Yeah, so I don't, and I'm embarrassed to say that I don't. I know influencer. D is, I call it driver, and the S would be.
The S is tough. I would have not have gotten this one.
Yeah, I don't know that I can get it right offhand. I'm embarrassed to say I probably should know this because I really rely on it a lot.
Yeah.
But I know it is DISC, and I guess like my own profile, and I kind of associate that as I run into people or interact with people based on their DISC profile.
Yeah.
So fill me in, the S and the C.
Yeah, so D they have as dominance, but okay. Yes, I influence. S is steadiness. And then C is conscientiousness.
Yeah.
So do you remember your type?
Sense.
Were you?
Yeah. So I'm a D. So the one we use here, it talks about your primary, your kind of your outward facing, and then your inward facing. My outward would be a D followed by a pretty close I.
Yeah.
And then not too far behind that, or on my outward, then my S kind of falls off, it would be the next one there. On my inward, my D, I, and S is pretty close to the I. It was kind of interesting how they're different on that outward versus inward. But yeah, mine DI for sure.
Good. That doesn't surprise me from our conversations. But yes, and not judging you, because if it wasn't for Google, I wouldn't have remembered them either.
Yeah, no, I should have. Man, you caught me on that one. That was a tough one.
But for anybody listening, again, if you haven't heard a DISC assessment, it is good. It's easy to execute, and it does, it just lets you know who your people are and lets you find the right place for your people, and places where they might have a better chance of success.
And ultimately the ability to benchmark.
Mhm.
I think as we're starting to do that within our organization here and really looking at, who are the successful candidates in our organization. We have a lot of D's,
Mhm.
and which makes sense, in the business we're in, and sales, and all of these things that we're driving on. But it's interesting then too is to find that balance
Right.
of individuals and who really balances that team.
Right. Good. And so I'm going to use this to segue a little bit into an extra question that I had asked you earlier about your favorite
Okay.
books. But there's a reason why this one is, because I know your answers right now, but I'm not going to spoil it. But you had mentioned that, you've got at Volvo that you're trying to grow, and it was just it's more intricate and it's more detailed. Than just adding headcount, right? Because you don't want to necessarily just grow linearly. You can't scale very well that way. You need to increase that curve, that rate of growth, which is one of the early
Yep.
points in a book that you recommended to me. So we'll get into what that actually is, but I want you first. So I'm going to pose the question. What are your top books? Which ones would you recommend? And let's have a discussion about those.
Yeah, and we talked about this a little bit, and I think the one that a lot of times when this question is brought up, and if you're a Deere employee and probably as a dealer, a lot of times you hear people talking about the book Good to Great, where it talks about getting the right people in the bus and getting them in the right seat. And I've been around a lot of Deere dealer groups, and that tends to be a book that's discussed a lot. Deere actually had an author come and speak at a meeting by It's Your Ship.
Mm,
And it's one about a Navy captain, basically, and how he turned around his ship. And I had actually read that one. So Deere had a meeting, it was a couple years ago, where he spoke, and really enjoyed the book. And I really got into reading that book. And it's a quick read, and it was one that really talked about listening to your team and implementing change based on that feedback of the team, and really a phenomenal book, really focused on the team. But what was interesting was when I was reading It's Your Ship, someone had recommended to me this book called Multipliers, and I actually told them I wished I would have read Multipliers before I read It's Your Ship. And this book Multipliers, it's by Liz Wiseman, and it really ultimately it talks about a lot of attitude, approach, who's a multiplier and who's a diminisher, or what are things as leaders that we do as multipliers, or what are things that we do as a leader that are diminishers. And just from the word multiplier versus diminisher, you start to get an idea of where are you adding
mhm.
value, how are you encouraging, and ultimately too is how are you discouraging. And I think for me, I was very fortunate. The organization, in GreenMark, our board had encouraged me to have they encourage any leader to have an executive coach, just kind of a part of our own personal
Mhm.
development. And I've been very fortunate in companies I work for have had mentors and coaches. But this experience, it always challenges you to find the blind spots, and we all have blind spots. And while we like to think that we don't, we do. And going through this book, kind of at that same time, it was amazing to me, even in where I felt like I'm an encourager, and I felt like I try to influence, and I'm the eternal optimist, and on and on and on, and realizing those blind spots really getting highlighted in as a diminisher,
Right.
things that I would say or things that we would do or not do, and that influence that has on being a diminisher it was really surprising to
Yeah,
me.
that was one of the first things that I caught in that book is, it was apparent with um, the multiplier and the diminisher, but it didn't delineate people into buckets. It said you can be a multiplier, but you have diminishing tendencies. And it was, I think for me, it was actually I was mowing my lawn, so I had a lot of good reflective time on this. And
Yeah.
they had talked about a certain type of tree that provides shade for the people below it, but that's not necessarily the best thing for the people below it because it doesn't drive them. It just provides an area of comfort. And so by being that style of leader, you're actually being a little bit of a diminisher for your people because you're not challenging them appropriately. And
Yeah.
another thing that it wasn't too far off that mark in the book, they had talked about being a talent magnet, which gets a little bit back to
Yeah.
I know Brian, who's joined your team recently, a very talented individual, but they had talked about drawing out the native geniuses within your people, which I'll paraphrase here, but essentially everybody's got strengths. And how do you best draw those out? So one of the things I liked most about this book, and granted, I'm a third of the way through it, so haven't wrapped
Right.
it up yet, but they had said, they've got the strengths, but don't just let them be out there and hope that they catch fire, but name them. Figure out what their strengths are, be very observant, and then say, you are good at this. And by actually
Yeah.
putting a name to it, provides a little bit of pride within the person, accelerates them, and then it helps them also to understand that you recognize it, they recognize it. Hopefully, they elevate it and then step up to whatever the task it is. I
Yeah.
know, again, I'm driving on a very specific point, but is that something that you've been able to embrace or do?
Yeah, yeah. So definitely, I try, and I think my takeaway, even from that talent magnet portion, is how we ultimately have to be, and I don't, I think if anyone on my team were to listen to this, they'd probably say, yeah, he does that, or no, he doesn't do
Mm-hmm.
that, right? I mean, I think it's how we become very purposeful without overtly hey I'm talking about
Right.
your talent and trying to be this draw this out. I think one of the things that as an organization that we did here, and I think it kind of plays in with that, has been is as an organization we invested in a leadership development program, and this was kind of early on, and it was something that we did from that was being driven based on we do, like a lot people organizations, we do an annual employee survey, and one of the things, the feedback areas that we were getting was one of our lower scoring areas was related to my supervisor. There are questions that were specifically geared towards my supervisor. And so we put in place a leadership development program, and it was a 12-month program for every leader in the organization. And not only was it a once a month come together and really um, go through a class training as a group, but then there was individual one-on-one coaching for every leader. And I think what we saw, and it kind of goes back to this talent magnet, is that we all have employees that want to be heard. We all have employees that, I remember my very first boss, and great guy, but I remember, my first review was, well, if there's something wrong, I'm going to tell you. And if you're doing things right, you're probably not going to hear from me. And versus, I think definitely as individuals, and I think it ties in really well with that talent magnet, is people want to know, right? And I think we all want to know, what is it that we're doing well, what is it that we're not doing well, and how do we continue to challenge ourselves? But then two is, how do we have those conversations with our teams? And so organizationally, as we were rolling out these coaching sessions, at the same time really trying to push on one-on-ones, even to the point where service managers one-on-ones with their technicians, or store managers one-on-one with their salesmen, really making sure that we're getting that one-on-one interaction and that real direct kind of feedback back and forth. Not perfect by any means. We got a long ways to go, but it definitely started to see some different level of engagement and response by our employees too.
Right. Yeah, we hear it too, more specifically on the sales side and even within CRM of people want to know how they're doing. And
Hmm.
for us, it's a lot of, hey, show me my metrics within a CRM system and my dashboard of how I'm performing. But then it is that feedback loop of let me know how I'm doing so then I can continually improve. And yeah, and this isn't the first conversation we've had with other leaders that are like that. It's that direct feedback, consistent feedback that makes people have the ability to grow. Gives them the space.
For sure.
Okay, so then that gets a little bit because, correct me if I'm wrong, that program that you're talking about, that leadership development program, is that the values voyage or is that something different?
No, that's something different. Really, the values voyage is something new that we just started to roll out. This was really just it was actually a John Maxwell training program, and then working with a local John Maxwell kind of training program, working with that individual, and it really, less about the program is more about kind of that engagement with that team. And what we really saw was the one-on-one interaction. We had individuals that really grabbed a hold of it, and really we saw really, they enjoyed it. They've given a ton of feedback. We've had some people that really struggled to engage with it, right? It's something brand new, but what we found was that really driving coaches, that was challenging us, having the difficult conversation. And sometimes, even as a leader, sometimes that is the hardest part we have is my natural is I think I'm better at giving a compliment and telling you, Andy, great job, and you really killed this one, and maybe, the area that you struggled, maybe, in my past, I would struggle sometimes with that more challenging conversation, but really, it's for all of us. And I think that multipliers really challenged me, even in how do I even more aggressively. One of the things they talk about is challengers, is debate makers, how you kind of constructively strengthen yourselves through that debate and strengthen the organization through some of those more challenging conversations.
Good. And so on that, because I thought the fact in the book where they talked about the debaters, the challengers, in contrast to sometimes you have to trust and liberate people and let them go.
Yep.
How do you coach people along that line? Or is that something where you bring in those executives, those other professional coaches, and kind of let them do their task?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm a believer in, and I would tell anyone that I work with is, it starts with, if you disagree, come in my office, pound your fist on the desk, tell me I'm a horrible guy, and you have that opportunity. But when we walk out the door, let's be aligned. And my own personal story was, I have two phenomenal sons and love them to death. And both of my boys really challenged me on this whole why, and I grew up in a house where, you didn't ask why,
Right.
you just did. And there was an understanding or an acceptance. And I feel like, I had two boys that really challenged me. Hey, we're going to do this. Well, why are we going to do it? Right. And it's really encouraging that conversation. And I think it's the same thing, and at least for me in my professional life. And as you think about culture and organization, people want a voice, and people want an opportunity. And, to me, there's nothing better. Today I'm in my office. I'd much rather be out in a store and engaged with the team. And I love that opportunity that we have to be out and there side by side with our team, and really hearing them and really trying to learn and grow from that.
Good. And I didn't expect the parenting advice right now, but considering I've got 3 young kids and I hear the why all the time, I will take it.
Yeah.
Hey, everybody. Andy here. I want to take a second to ask you to subscribe and follow this podcast if you like what you've been hearing. We don't want you to miss out on the latest updates and insights for your dealership. Now, let's get back to this episode. So we're naturally morphing into the culture that GreenMark has, and the culture that you're continuing to fortify out there. Can you explain a little bit about the history and heritage of GreenMark, and then how that's led into where you are today? And then we'll pick up on the second half of that question on where you're taking it.
Yeah, I mean, it's humbling to think, is it me taking it, or is it? I mean, clearly, what I truly believe is there are phenomenal people, and very passionate people about not just the industry, but this business, and it's their life, and they've grown up around it. I think, we're very fortunate in GreenMark Equipment. Was started by, there's a couple different organizations. The Timmerman family started Fillmore Equipment, which is right here near Holland, Michigan. We had the Gilsinger family, which was in Indiana, and has a very deep history and heritage that goes way back. Howard and Sons, there was a combination of individuals that kind of had a vision and a growth, and as they continue to grow, saw an opportunity to merge together, and what created GreenMark Equipment. Really, GreenMark Equipment, whether it was Fillmore Equipment, whether it was Gilsinger's, it's a very deep, rich history and heritage of the land, and the connection to the people and the communities, and I think really as an organization, I think one of the things that I look to is it's got a deep connection to the communities that we're a part of, and it's got a deep connection to agriculture. It's not things that I have to go do. Really, it's the opportunity that I get to be a part of, an amazing team with a phenomenal foundation that was built, and really working together as a team of defining what's that vision, what does that future look like. And no doubt, it's centered around how do we continue to grow the business, right? And that's key. It's we're a business, and we're in business to grow, and to be good stewards of what we've been given. A believer in customer service, and it's how we take care of customers. I mean, I we talk about it as a team all the time. Where you go do business today, no doubt retail has taken a hit. It's changed a lot through COVID, and it's almost back to the basics of how do we get to kind of reprove what is customer service, or what is that customer experience, what should it be in the future, and how do we be, how are we a part of that? It's employee development, and that key, how do we develop employees, and how do we lean in, and just hiring people is not an easy thing. And so how do we train, and how do we invest in our team, and ultimately collectively continue to grow that business? But I think that's a long way of saying, very blessed by the foundation that was started by the Timmermans, by the Gilsingers, by those, and really blessed to be a part of a really solid team that has a desire to continue to grow, and has a desire to continue to take care of the customers. And no doubt we have to continually figure out how we do that better and better every day.
And I like how you kind of phrase that of it, and again, I'm paraphrasing for you, but a little bit like shepherding and guiding the culture. And so I think all too often, and I get caught in this too, of you just spout out the build culture, because that's what you hear. How do you build culture? But really, you're taking the best of the area that you're in, of the land, the people, the heritage, and then guiding it forward. And really shepherding it maybe is a better idea, a better phrase, because you might be in charge of it, but there's a lot of stakeholders and a lot of people that rely on you guys.
Yeah, and you're right, and I think it is. When I had the opportunity to go into Volvo, and it was this company that was a leader, had been there for a really long time, and as a team and as an organization, they were very hungry for the change, and I really had to change my mindset. I'm kind of adapted as I came into GreenMark. One of the things I love change, and I love being a part of driving change. And one of the things I had to really kind of recalibrate, and I still work on every day, is a part of that change is not always change, right? Sometimes it's understanding and appreciating really what got us here. And sometimes I've done it kicking and screaming because I love change. And a lot of times I've gone into a role, or I've gone into a position, and there was something to fix, or there was something to do. And I would tell you, I've had to kind of change my mindset here, because it wasn't about a huge change. It was more about how do we evolve, and really how do we just continue to evolve, not just as an organization, but how do we continue to evolve as an agricultural industry? And we're a part of a business that technology is growing, global competition is expanding, all of these things. And what is the future of agriculture? What is the things, very confident in? We all need to eat, and there's a confidence in the industry you're in, but it's evolving, and kind of what is our role in that? I think, I don't know that one individual leads it more so. I like that. What you said, shepherding, or, I feel like we're stewards of a business, of an industry, and kind of families that we have a responsibility to work together with.
Good. And so, as long as you haven't trademarked it, that evolution management instead of change management, I think there's something there.
Right.
You mentioned the area, so the geography that you're in. Before we started recording, we were talking about the sandy soils out in Michigan. I mean, you guys can grow a plethora of food. You've got the lake effect for great moisture. I mean, there's just so many things. And this is a question we haven't discussed yet, but on the analytical side and just the business side, I'm curious what opportunities versus challenges are out in your dealerships in terms of your inventory. Because I mean, where I'm at in Iowa, we've got row crop, and that's what we've got.
Yeah.
You have to have so much more. What's that like?
Yeah. It's interesting. So anybody that knows me, I grew up in Kansas City. I'm a Chiefs fan. I see those roots. I truly call, where I'm at today in Holland, this is home. I really have appreciated the becoming a part of the community of the area. But yeah, no, I mean, as you think about, from apples to pickles to tomatoes to blueberries to corn and soybean, to seed corn, watermelons. I mean, it's just a huge, diverse crop area and dairy and the expansion and all that goes with that. It's really interesting. My time in John Deere, I spent a lot of time in Iowa. I was a division sales manager in Iowa, I was a territory manager in Iowa, spent a lot of time in Iowa, spent time in Missouri and understanding agriculture. But you're right, it's row crop and it's some livestock and hogs or turkeys or chickens. Up here, it is everything from eggs to hogs to dairy to all of the corn and soybean, all of the crops, and really we sell combines, we sell choppers, we sell tractors, we sell a lot of tractors, and I would say that's probably the biggest difference is my friends that are in Missouri or in Iowa, and as they're kind of battling combines today,
Right.
we're probably battling tractors more so, but I think as a whole, that diversity helps us kind of spread some of that risk and some of that challenge where some industries may be off more, some may not be the same, and so that diversity we feel is somewhat of a competitive advantage for
Good.
us.
Yeah, I think probably a lot of the dealers, at least around my area, would agree with you right now. Less combines is probably better. So,
Yeah.
okay. Uh, I wanted to spend a fair amount of time talking about people. I mean, it pulls from the Multipliers book. You had mentioned, employee development, training, but hiring, getting the right people. Uh, the the topic of coaching has come up. And you had been coached, and you talk about providing coaching for your team members. I was talking with another dealer the other day that had utilized a Dale Carnegie course. For anybody that's interested in this topic, do you have any advice for them on how to go about it? Should they just go look at a book? Should they look at professional services? How do you vet those professional services to figure out what's best for your dealership? Because it's, correct me if I'm wrong, but this is, 1 to 2 steps beyond probably what you've been trained to do within the equipment world.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I would tell you my perspective, and a lot of companies, you take a John Deere, you take a Volvo, they have development programs, and they're even utilizing outside services, outside companies, to kind of bring that expertise in. I know for our organization, as we brought on coaching, I mean, I think someone outside that's really independent, and I think I've had the opportunity to utilize mentors and a mentoring relationship. This is very different. There was I don't know if I told you this when we talked before, but there was a podcast series by Michael Crichton, and I mean, he's a writer, and everybody knows of him, and he did a podcast series on coaching, and it really kind of surprised me. There was a book that he talked about in it where, and I won't remember the title exactly, but it talked about kind of the game of tennis, and it was basically an individual that wrote a book about being good at tennis or being great at tennis, but But the point throughout the book, and Crichton really tried to highlight, was around, just this idea of a coach, and we all need coaches, and it's different than a mentor, and a mentor a lot of times is challenging, encouraging, but a coach is really about kind of peeling back, finding those blind spots. And I think, to answer your question, my encouragement would be is I think it's got to be an external resource. And I think, internally, we're clouded sometimes by whether it's, you could call it politics or, just kind of managing those relationships that we have internally, versus a really good coach is someone that's going to kind of peel back and challenge. And I remember this coach that I had, I went into it saying, I'm really busy and I don't want a lot of homework. And so, I want to make sure that I'm not having to spend too much time with this, to the point where, she got me doing things and kind of, introspectively looking and really peeling back, those blind spots that we have. And so I'm definitely a firm believer in, there's a lot of different outside resources. Find them and encourage, interview them and explore them, and, a coaching relationship, interview them so you understand kind of what you're getting into. But I think if you've ever thought about doing that, having an outside coach, and I have friends in different businesses that utilize really that coaching relationship, and no doubt in my mind, and I think others would say, there's value in it for
Right.
sure.
Yeah, I would agree. It's not something I've always been, attuned to. But the older I get and the more experience that I have, then I start also with the fact that it is tough to hire really good talent right now, and the retention of talent is incredibly important. And so the more that you can do to invest in what you have and retain what you have, just that also makes business sense.
Yeah.
Good. Okay. So, we had touched a little bit on values, people, physical space in terms of the macro in your area, about the land that is Michigan and northern Indiana, but then also the physical space. And we had talked about this, in our earlier conversation. How does that impact people and the way that they work? So the place, the dealership where they walk into, does that influence your culture at all?
Yeah, it's interesting. You brought up Brian, and one of the things, it's been fun. So as an organization, Brian Knotts came on our team. Within, I think he's maybe 90 days in, 80 days in, and one of the things that he's shared with me as he's kind of gone around is impressed with facilities, and the investment that's been made on facilities, and as an organization, our continued investment on facilities. Now, we've got, facilities that we need to continue to upgrade and update, but if you look, and I would tell you, really, you look over the last 10 years, the investment that, at least from a John Deere dealer perspective, that I've seen John Deere dealers invest in. We did a recent upgrade, and added a new storefront on in a facility, in a location, and in the process of adding on additional shop space and overhead cranes and all of those right investments that you need to do. But it was interesting. I was in the location talking to our team and talking to a couple of the parts guys, and they were telling me they were surprised by the number of people walking in the door wanting to apply for a position that they hadn't done before, and had said, really impressed by, oh, is this place new? Is this, really kind of commenting to. And I think, sometimes we don't, fully grasp or maybe fully remember the importance of pride of where I work, and pride of that team that I'm a part of. And I think it's important, and definitely I'm very appreciative of our ownership group, and how the investments have been made into facilities, and the commitment to continually upgrading and improving facilities there. It's important, and I think definitely important to our employees as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a firm believer in the physical space. I mean, like you said, you walk into a place and it's your first impression, and we all know how big first impressions are. And then even, at a different level, you're at Holland, Michigan. I'm down in Pella, Iowa. We're both heavily Dutch communities, and I just got done digging up my tulips. Yeah, legally, it was the week had passed, so I could legally dig those up and not get thrown into Dutch jail. But the way that the town presents itself too, just elevates it. I mean, there's a
Yeah.
people act different, and then people also want to come and be a part of it, because that appearance, that intentional appearance, uh, makes people behave differently, in a positive
Yeah.
sense.
No, yeah, and it's it's pride of what you're a part of. I mean, you can kind of see in the background where my office sits
Mhm.
and kind of looks out over the wash bay, and so a lot of times there's equipment coming in and out of there, and I'm reminded of the our drivers and semi drivers and one the couple of the guys here that drive semis here and I'll talk to them. I'll see them washing their truck, and talk to them. And man, Kelly, that looks really good. And I mean, he's proud of what he has, right? And I think that exemplifies the pride of the team. And as an organization, we continue we're growing and expanding how we train and develop. And we have
Mhm.
to. We're doing more and more in house and bringing more and more of that here. And really growing and expanding the team and what we find is it's really difficult. And I'm kind of going off on a tangent here, but it's really interesting to me is we struggle sometimes. There's less and less farm kids
Right.
that we have the opportunity to go hire. But what I really appreciate is as I look at the team, Kelly, the truck driver, takes great pride in his truck and his coaching and development that he's offering some of our new young guys and cleaning up their area and really taking pride in the work that we do and the service that we provide. We're in a phenomenal
Mhm.
industry, and John Deere talks about, it's the food, the fiber, and we talk about how we're a part of feeding the world. And while that's big and it's hard to really grasp in our mind, but I think our industry, and I see it over and over again, is the pride of not just what we do, it's the customers we serve, it's the industry that we're a part of. And I think, to your point on Pella, and I would tell you here in Holland, but really throughout our entire area, the pride of the communities that we're a part of, man, it's just, it's exciting, it's empowering, it's what gets you up in the morning a lot of days is to be a part of that strength of that
Yeah,
team.
absolutely. Yeah, well said. Okay, Jeff, I think we could probably go on for another couple hours, especially if we started to dive deep into some of these books. But I do want to put a bow on this with one question that I posed to you last time, but I didn't get your answer from. I wanted to give you a little bit of time to think about an advice type of question. So the question is, what advice would you now give to your younger self?
Yeah, it's a tough question even right now to answer it. I think number one is I'm in awe, and I enjoy working with people that are extremely inquisitive. And while I think that ability to ask questions, kind of going back to our why earlier, and as a young individual, I really grew up and really, I'm very thankful for what my parents gave me, but I grew up in an era when you didn't ask as many questions, and I think, for me, if I were to go back, is really challenge myself, my young self, of how you ask questions, or, how you dive in and truly try to understand, what makes this, whatever this is, what makes, this up, or what goes into this, and kind of those things, definitely would encourage that. I think the other thing is, and I've always been, as an individual, I feel like I've always been receptive to feedback, and I really welcome it. I appreciate it, but continue to encourage, that desire for feedback as well as constructively giving feedback. I always wanted to be the nice guy, and I had to learn how to give that more challenging feedback. And I think do that earlier as my earlier self of how you give that challenging feedback sometimes it probably kind of help expedite some of those learning and development and those experiences. Um, I think the last thing I would say is, and I don't know that, this was any different for me back then as it is today, is, be open to new and be open to change. One of the things that I really feel like I learned a lot as a John Deere employee John Deere went 10 plus years with, not a lot of hiring. And then as they started to hire people, I got a ton of opportunities to see different areas of the company at different, kind of different experiences. And I can tell you that I miss downtown Kansas City, or I miss the plaza of Kansas City, but I love, this opportunity to see and understand a different area. And I would tell you, as we're trying to recruit people, that's one of the things that we find challenging is, I get the idea of being planted and not wanting to move, but I also, the encouragement is it's a big world out there. And I think there's a ton of opportunities. And I think we can continue to learn from those experiences of going to a Pella, Iowa, or going to a Holland, Iowa, and seeing and understanding some of, within this great country we have, is some of the different cultures and experiences that you can gain through that.
Yeah, exactly. And your point on challenging others. I had an early mentor that told me, his biggest piece of advice was learn to say no. Now knowing where I'm at, I see the wisdom in that. The one thing I wish he would have followed up with, which you kind of elaborated on, was why. Like, why say no? Why is that so important? And then how do you do it? So yeah, I just wanted to add that. And then I do want to maybe just let you know that you're doing a good job, because if you're, your advice to your younger self was be more inquisitive, ask the whys or whatever, but yet you're seeing it out of your sons, there's probably a good chance that that you're exuding that advice already. So congratulations there.
Yeah, either that or they're hard-headed and they just know how to push back.
Yes, that depends on if they're watching this podcast or not. So
right.
Good.
Sure.
Well, Jeff, hey, I really appreciated you being on the podcast. I've enjoyed getting to know you, and I just want to say thank you for your time and everything you're doing out at GreenMark.
Yeah, thanks, Andy. Appreciate this opportunity. It's been great to meet you, and really enjoyed the time together with you.
Okay, fantastic. Okay, thank you everybody for joining this edition of Beyond the Hood with Tractor Zoom. Stay tuned for more episodes. Take care. Thank you for joining me for this first episode of Beyond the Hood with Tractor Zoom and my discussion with Jeff Oldham, CEO of GreenMark Equipment. I'd like to take a second to ask you to subscribe to this podcast on your favorite podcasting channel, and please share this with the other dealers in your network. It's our goal to help give you a little bit of time and space to fuel your dealership growth, and we hope it did just that, to give you some time to look beyond the hood. Till next time, take care.